Got it. I'm Gill Chester. I run a small e-learning development company called Little Man Project. And because some of you have heard me speak and given my kind of who I am and my facts, I thought in this session we do something a bit different. So I'm going to be talking about creativity, but very much focused on creativity in terms of e-learning design. So it's kind of a little bit of the process of how we develop e-learning in the context that I think will be helpful for you, and some of the creative things that we do to make that work. So in terms of my intro, I thought I'd do a little 5 truths and a lie. So this should be possible for everybody. So in this slide here, you will find 5 things that are true about Little Man Project, and there's 1 lie in there. I'd love it if you put in the chat what you think the lie is, and then I will give you some feedback. So I know some of you know us quite well, so you might be able to pick up some. Some might struggle. Now, can I see the chat? That's the only other problem. Can't see the chat while I'm presenting, which isn't. Okay, so some people think it's the office dog, that it's the best place to live, that we guess that Strive got an award. There you go, there you go. Laura's not convinced, but she thinks the rest is true. Actually, that may be the thing that you think is the least likely, but actually that did happen. And if you've been to Stroud, you're probably quite surprised by this fact. I know everyone I know who lives in Stroud was very surprised by this. We love it, mostly, people who live there, but it was a shock to find out that everybody else, or at least the Times panel, agreed with us, because we're not the Cotswold chocolate box town that other places are. We've got a bit of grit and sawdust and a lot of weirdness. So no, that was true. Little Man Project is based in Stroud, and we did run the 2021. We do have an office dog. Her name is Socks, and she doesn't live here. She does go home, but she is in most days. She has been described as our therapy dog. She is scared of her own shadow, which is why that picture of her is her looking very wide-eyed and slightly scared of being asked to have a photo taken. But she is amazing for anyone who gets stressed or is upset about anything, with the stuff that happens in daily life. She will always come and give you a cuddle, and she's a great excuse to take a break. So 11 plus is true, and that has again surprised us all. It kind of crept up on us in lockdown. So the lie is that we haven't just worked with charities in the UK. It's a bit of a sneaky one. We have worked with over 50 charities, but we've also worked with charities across Europe, US and Australia. So quite a wide breadth of charities, and lots of different charity related topics. So we do the kind of standard compliance stuff, but we've also done some amazing work on drug usage, reproductive health, lots of kind of niche topics that relate very specifically to the charity that we're working with. So I'm going to talk about creativity in e-learning design, but obviously e-learning design is a big topic. And so I thought it would kind of be a bit remiss to just talk about that one bit as if the rest wasn't important. So what I want to do is just run through the layers of important areas that people need to be aware of, that they need to have when they're designing e-learning, and then we'll just focus on one strip of that. So for me, the base is this core knowledge that your developer should have. So that's going to be instructional design knowledge, knowledge of an authoring tool, whatever tool is your choice, a good understanding of graphic design. Even if they're not producing the graphics, they need to be able to guide people, and they need to understand what works and what doesn't visually. And again, you don't need to be a user interface expert, but you do need to understand how the eye tracks across the screen, where is a good place to put objects, you know, color combinations, those sorts of things. So that's your core knowledge. And then when you have a particular project, you're going to be thinking about, you know, the specifics to that project. So you've got your core knowledge as an expert, and then on top of that, you're going to need to make sure that you understand the topic that you're covering. You're going to need to understand who it's for and what their needs are. And you're going to have a baseline agreed outcomes, so that you are delivering and ensuring that that outcome is achieved. Not that you just have created a module on a topic, that you've met the outcome. So that's my kind of next level. And then you're going to work with the subject matter expert, whoever that might be, to produce their source material. We believe very strongly that you need to have your topic knowledge, your learner knowledge, and your outcomes agreed first, and then you work with the subject matter expert. We would suggest, I would suggest, that if you're getting your source material before guiding your expert into what is needed, then you end up being led more by the topic rather than the outcome, because the subject matter expert is very entrenched in, you know, a GDPR, they need to know everything, they need to know about the law and the principles, and, you know, they get really into their topic. Whereas if you're working with them to understand what the outcome is, what does the learner need to do as a result, then you can guide them to produce some source material that then help you to meet that goal, not just talk about the topic. And then the next step is what we're going to cover today. So for us, that's about kind of considering different instructional design models, thinking about treatments, coming up with designs, and doing our research. And those are the topics that I'm going to cover. And then the next step, once we've completed that and we're on to our next stage, then we're thinking about building it, creating our media, writing our text so that it works, making sure that it's accessible and that it's inclusive, and then completing our quality assurance through it. So this is our kind of build stage, but that lays on a foundation of this other activity in blue that I want to talk about today. And then you're going to go into our feedback and iteration process with your project team, whether that's your subject expert, you know, you might have some learners in there, you might have some kind of managers. So that's, you know, once you've built your module, you're going into this continual process of getting feedback until it's right. So what do I mean by research and inspiration? So we kind of start this process. So we've got the source material, we've been through it, we've understood it as much as we can. We talked to our subject expert to really kind of get to the heart of what they're talking about. And then we carry out our kind of research and inspiration side. So we'll kind of start by just the topic itself. So obviously we have source material, but what we're doing now is we're kind of researching around our source. So we've got we know what the subject expert wants us to say, but we're starting to do some research around that. So it might be, you know, what is other people saying about this topic? How do they present it? You know, it's going to be important to not just search for safeguarding, but, you know, types of abuse, or, you know, safeguarding adults. Start to kind of use your terms around that to be looking at, you know, a kind of the wider, you know, go down the rabbit hole, start looking at this and then go down to this and then go down to this. The other thing that's quite important is the kind of audience specific, because clearly a course for safeguarding experts is going to be very different to a course for, you know, children on safeguarding. So thinking about who your audience is and how content, you know, researching around the topic for the audience itself, so that you're, you know, starting to get some ideas from that. And then the next thing we do is we really love to hear what the experts are saying. So there's that kind of general stuff, you know, just Google. But starting to identify who are experts in the field and how they're talking about it, how they present sensitive content, you know. So, you know, if you think about maybe kind of, you know, an animal charity, they might be no, okay, I'm going to use a different example. Safeguarding, the classic that Jen, who is on the call with me, you can wave in the chat, Jen. She always gives the example of, safeguarding, that people quite often will use silhouettes because they want to show that, provide anonymous or, not showing kind of specific individuals. But the result of that is that you are effectively victim, you're showing them as victims. And so, researching around how experts talk about individuals and topics is a really useful way to understand the best way to present that context in the nuances that it needs to have. Looking at the way that they present, maybe some diagrams or, kind of really good ways of engaging people and getting that content across to people, looking at what the experts are doing. The other thing I would say is that sometimes it's a really good way to find out how not to do things. And I mentioned this in a moment about images. Sometimes you will look at something and instantly have a reaction to it. And if that's a negative reaction, then you need to make sure you've recorded that so you know not to do it yourself. So it's really about, how do the experts talk about it? What do they recommend in terms of presenting this information? How are they communicating to their audience online? And then, you can start to think about how you might then adopt that. And so the last one is really kind of, doing your Google image search, looking at stock images. That's always an interesting one. We use a site called Shutterstock. You probably know it. And that's quite interesting to kind of Google some of your, to search for some of your terms, just to see how the stock image library are presenting, or having a look at, image libraries to see what they're saying. But, I will reiterate, particularly around, imagery, sometimes if you see a lot of imagery around one particular topic, then that's a flag for me that that's not the imagery you should be using, because people are already desensitized to it. So my classic one will be data protection. Everyone puts a lock on it. There's always a lock and a key and all those kind of symbolisms that people know. We try and steer away from those, because the last thing you want is someone to open a piece of e-learning and think, oh God, here we go, another one of these. So sometimes it's about identifying things that you shouldn't be using because people are too used to them or they've seen it a lot already. So, those are the sorts of things that we would kind of be looking at. So we're thinking about how is what research and information can we learn about the topic? What do the experts say about the topic, and how do they present that? And visually, how are people showing it? Then when it comes to looking at different design approaches, Pinterest is your friend. We have a board that we use, but, going on, there's loads and loads of examples of e-learning. If you're an Articulate user, it's definitely worth going on to their community site and having a look at what they're doing. One of the things we've done, I can show you my camera, is that we have these boxes, which you can see in here. I thought I'd prove that they were real by actually getting them out. And we have cards and cards and cards. And I mean, you can see that we've got 3 boxes there of different examples of different approaches. So some of these are our slides and stuff we've built. Some of them are stuff we've found. Some are just, newspaper clippings. And so we categorize those so that if we're building a menu, we can go into our menu section and have a look at some of the ideas. Now, we never end up reproducing, to this day we don't, even after 11 years of, examples that we have, but they can be a great starting point for inspiration. Oh, well, what if we did this bit and then if it had this as well? And I think that would work really well because we've got to get across this message and, those sorts of things. So definitely, when it comes to kind of creativity and design, I think that kind of hands-on element of getting a card out, having a look at it, those are the sorts of things that we think are really powerful. And the sorts of things that are really great for then communicating with others, your thoughts. So, I think it will look a bit like this, but if we did this instead. And so that kind of element to the process is a really good way of having that conversation with others and finding inspiration. And so the last thing that we often do, now this is not one of ours because it looks far too clean and pretty. We create mood boards, so just in PowerPoint, it's a copy and a paste from all the different sources. We might crop out bits and pieces, but what it's doing is it's covering, how people talk about the topic visually, how we visually think that the module might look, right down to kind of what types of icons might we use, and what types of photographs might be appropriate. Now, from your perspective, obviously you'll be working within the brand, so some of these things will already exist for you, but some of them might not. So you might not use as part of your brand an icon, but you want to include it, you think it's going to be appropriate. So then, it's a good way to record some examples of things that you like. And sometimes you'll be pushing the boundaries and you might be trying to produce a piece of e-learning which goes a little bit off that standard brand approach. You might want to do a game. And if you're doing that, then it's better to be using game elements that, maybe they're using the brand color and the brand font, but if it's a game, it shouldn't look like the website. It should look like a game. So this is a great way to start bringing together some of those ideas on, visuals relating to that approach that you're going to take. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about, kind of how you identify those. So the next thing is to think about, some instructional design models. Now, probably, if you're working in an instructional design setting, if you're designing e-learning or training, you probably know some of these models already. The problem is most of us, I certainly did my master's in e-learning over 20 years ago. So the idea that you kind of reflect back on instructional design models on a regular basis, yes, if somebody said to you, flipped classroom, you'd probably nod intently and say, yes, no, I know that. Oh, that's a good idea. We might use that. But are you actively thinking about kind of a number of different instructional design models before you start designing your e-learning? Even to the point in which you're thinking about them before you talk to your subject expert. So I've given you some ones to maybe think about. These are not exhaustive. What I would say is, and it's something we're about to do ourselves because we haven't in the past, we're actually going to put summaries on cards similar to our designs. And then we're going to be kind of reflecting on, which one we might use and using that as a kind of a launch pad for our design process as well. So, really integrating. So I'm about to do the thing I'm suggesting to you. Thinking about a instructional design model that might be the most appropriate for what you want to achieve and the topic, and where it's going to sit, if it's kind of in a blended program, which one might be the most appropriate. And I've put the little smiley face by it. We use action mapping probably the most in all of these instructional models. We do learning games and gamification, but action mapping is probably the one that we kind of use the most out of all of these. So if you need any background and more information on any of these, take a screenshot of this slide and, go do some research. I would suggest, though, that some of these would be useful books, and I've kind of put them in a hierarchy. I think number one, if you're after background reading or a bit more information, then Design for How People Learn. Jen's going to put the links in the chat for us for these books. So Design for How People Learn, I absolutely love it, to the point in which we bought a book for everybody in the business. Map It, which is actually a more kind of detailed dive by Kathy Moore on action mapping. She's had a great website for years that we've been kind of using to learn the technique, but the book is kind of came out in the last, well, it was pre-COVID, but we forget about the COVID years, so the last few years. And a more recent book is How People Learn. Now, I haven't read the whole of this book, but I'm excited enough by the first few chapters to include it in this list. So that's from Nick Shackleton-Jones, who has spoken at a number of members' meetings, so I would recommend that. And then if you're interested in blended learning, Clive Shepherd's book, More Than Blended Learning, is a really, really good practical book. So all of these are kind of, I mean, Nick's book's probably a little bit more academic, but the other three are very practical, you know, lots of example kind of books where you can really kind of get to grips with what they're wanting you to understand. And then the last book, which if you've come to any of my previous sessions, I quote Mike Montiago quite a lot. I absolutely love him. It isn't about instructional design, but it's a book about the moral responsibility of a designer. And I think it brings together a lot of the things I feel strongly about when it comes to designing e-learning. So he's talking about general design, but you know, I genuinely think you can apply everything you would learn in this book to designing e-learning and training in general. And so it's very focused on your responsibilities in terms of the quality that you put into the world. So that's kind of an ad hoc one, just because I'm always going to recommend his stuff. So Design for How People Learn and Map It would be my top suggestions. But if you are interested in blended learning, then Clive Shepherd's book. Okay, so the next thing would be to consider your treatments. Now, the kind of order of these, I definitely think the research one goes first, but, you know, your treatment versus in your instructional model, you know, we can switch those around. So if you're not kind of familiar with the term treatment, it's very kind of e-learning-y. It's this concept that, you know, the creative approach you're going to take for your e-learning. So, for instance, if you're going to take the approach of creating a game, then that is the treatment that you're using. Okay, so that's the approach you're going to take. So we have gone to the point where we've actually kind of broken this down a little bit, and I think that's kind of a useful thing that I can offer you. So we have what we call the 3 T's. So we have this concept of a big T, a middle T, and a small t. And a big T is when it covers the whole of the module. A middle T is when it's just one particular section, and a small t is when it's just one slide or a collection of slides. So I'm going to show you some examples so that I hopefully can get across, you know, you can understand what I'm trying to kind of explain. So I'm going to start with a small t. So a small t is when you're designing a learning experience which is just very small. It's like 1 or 2 slides. So that's kind of going to be an interaction, or, you know, a number of interactions, but are on a kind of a common theme. So the top treatment is trying to help people understand that for somebody with autism, that they have this, you know, it's really important that they keep a balance on their emotion. So there are certain things that will withdraw energy from them and certain things that will give them energy. So this is a drag and drop exercise where you're placing the different kind of emotional things that will happen to them, and you will see how that balance is needed, and, you know, where the energy goes. So that's one slide, and that's an individual slide treatment. The slide below is this concept. We wanted to get across the concept that personal information is little parts of people. So if I know a little bit about you and then I add another little bit about you, if I bring those together, then it starts to get a little bit more dangerous in terms of information security. So we had this concept that people can fish for individual pieces of information. So it's actually a kind of a game, and you get the hook and you go around and you hook up this information. So it's the play on the word fishing, and you're gathering up this information. But where the power comes is then when you go into the next slide, and you drag those items into individuals, and they are revealed. So we're getting across this idea that, you know, 2 bits of information combined can then make somebody identifiable, and that's kind of a concept in terms of data protection and information security. So these are small t's, individual slides presenting individual concepts. Whereas a middle T is where it's one particular section. So you might have an introduction to the topic, you might have a little bit of kind of delve into that topic, but then you have a whole section which is themed around something. So this is a module that we created for cats protection, and I think there's a few cats protection people in the room who will wave. And this is part of their volunteer management program. So what we had was this concept of when you're working with volunteers, you have certain legal requirements. And if you overstep those or do the wrong thing, then you can get into legal problems. So what we did was we kind of explained all this, but then we got the learner to actually then interview people in a court of law to decide whether or not they felt the charity had overstepped and effectively turned that volunteer into an employee by the actions that they'd taken. There was 3 cases or 2 cases, and they were all based on kind of real experience, real law. So what the learner did was that it's 2 cases because they selected who they wanted to be to start with. They went into the courtroom and then they used the interaction to then interview them and make a decision on whether or not they thought the law had been breached. So from our perspective, this is a middle T because it's one section of a big module. And then a big T is where the whole module is based on that theme. So we did a module for the Royal British Legion and it was on gift aid, and through conversations with the subject expert, he felt that people understood things, but they were getting things wrong. So we came up with this concept of this kind of 80s game show, very cheesy. We played hard on the cheese factor, and we got the learner to kind of learn these individual facts through these different kind of game show elements. So the whole concept from start to finish, the moment you started to the moment you finished, was completely within this treatment and this concept. So one of the things that we do at the beginning of a module is we start to think about, we kind of go from big down. So we start to think about, is there anything in this module that we think could make a big T? Like, do we think that this could be a game or, a story or a day in the life or, anything to create that big T? And it's not to say that's the best, but it is the most creative and it is the most memorable. So if it fits, then that's our preference. If it doesn't fit, then we are not going to shoehorn it into that big T just because we like to have fun. So that's what that conversation's about. We're going to be saying, okay, do we think we can come up with this one big treatment around this? If not, okay, do we think is there a middle T in there? Okay. If not, it's a collection of really strong individual small T's. So that's just a conversation that we're having. And that's a useful thing to be reflecting on because it helps you to continually push yourself to, to do the next thing. Can I be more creative? Rather than just falling into a trap of continually just creating individual slides, that are really nice and, great interactions, but are a collection of treatments. So that's kind of the approach that we take with that. And sometimes it takes a bit of bravery to do a big T, and it always takes I don't know what the right expression is, but a subject expert who's willing to go with it and who is up for something that's different and something that's fun. So quite often we pitch the idea. So we might have our meeting with them, talk about what we're thinking, and maybe even show them some screenshots. And so, so I think we always have a very sort of special connection with a subject expert who's willing to kind of go with this and see how we can get on. We really need to sell this to make sure that it's not belittling their topic, to make sure that learners are going to get the outcome that we want and that we're not just being clever for the sake of being clever. I think the one thing I would say from a designer's perspective, that a T is working if you're able to take a topic, you know, any part of that module and make it fit into that T. If you start to find that you are really pushing things in and they don't really work and they shouldn't be like that, then you've got to reconsider whether or not it's right. So, you know, I don't want to labor that, but a T works best when it really works for the topic. And if it's not all working, then, you know, you need to be rethinking, because ultimately the outcome is the most important thing, not how pretty it looks. Pretty, clever, memorable, that is really important. But if it's not making the change that you want within your cohort of learners, then it's not right. So that's the kind of balance that you need to find. So the next session then is, you know, we've kind of got a mood board, we've done our research, we've thought about, you know, what treatments might be relevant. Now we're going to go and do our design session. So for us, a design session is when you bring together more than one person. So I've had a group, ideally, you know, 2, 3, 4 people is the right way to go. It's a bit like the old too many cooks. So 10 people would be way too many, but one person isn't going to give you the bouncing off of ideas that you need. So 3 or 4 people is ideal. And you are going to be thinking about the research that you've done, looking at the source material and coming up with the treatments for all of the slides. So you might have a big T in mind. You might say, I want to do a game, but you're going to have to be designing every single individual slide in there. And we do that without computers. It is very much hands-on, stand up, do stuff. I'm really sorry, Laura, but you might want to shut your eyes at this point. This is a photograph of you. Since you look beautiful, everybody. So this is a photograph. I don't have many photographs where we've done design sessions with clients, normally because they're quite shy at this point. But we spent, I think, Laura, you can correct me in the chat, I think we probably ended up with about 4 days in total, possibly 6, where we were designing a large program with cats protection. And so we did design sessions for multiple modules. The key to success there is, as you can see, sugar. So always lots of sweets and water and coffee. But that session, you know, it's messy. This is probably quite a tidy session, but it's, you know, it involves scissors and pens and drawing and standing up and drawing stuff and wiping it out and saying, no, that's not right. It should look like this. So I've got lots of photos of design sessions. If you came to our offices now, you could walk around and every whiteboard that you see, and we've probably got 20, will have some form of drawing on them because they haven't been wiped out from last time we had a discussion. So what you're doing is looking at that content. The scissors are because we're quite often cutting up sources of information. In fact, let me show you some pictures. You can see here where we've got lots of kind of cut-ups of different bits of source. You can see that drawing is by far not important. It's about communicating your idea. I cannot draw for toffee. I am always in the heart of a design session saying, you know, that's supposed to be a cat, please ignore the terrible drawing. And it's about communicating to people in the room, but also coming up with ideas together. And as you can see, sometimes the dogs get involved. So, you know, it's Post-its, it's pens, it's, you know, arrows drawn from one bit to another. We love the whiteboard factor because it's about having the confidence to draw something that might be wrong and then just wiping it out if it is. So pens and paper aren't as good for this because of that factor, because it gives you the confidence to just say, this is what I'm thinking. And then, okay, well, actually it wouldn't work because of it. You know, the whole group kind of pitches in and then you just wipe it and you carry on. So if it looks too neat, it's probably, you've probably had too many preconceived ideas, I would say. So when it comes to design session, we have these kind of sets of rules. So I'm kind of just going to talk you through each one. Aim high means, if you want to do a game, go for it. Go as high as you want. If you think, quite often we'll have conversations where we think, oh, wouldn't it be great if they could animate doing that? And, and the developers in the design session will be saying, oh, I don't know how we're going to do that. But sometimes we just write it down anyway and say, let's have a go. If we can't, aim high. If you can do it, then that's great. And if you can't, then we'll find something that's nearly as good underneath. So, go for it. Don't panic. Sometimes people can find it a little bit overwhelming, particularly if it's quite a fast-paced design session. Staying calm and allowing sometimes the design session to wash over you, so that people might have completed a slide and you haven't quite caught up with where we're going with it. That's okay, just let that happen. If you panic, then all creativity will disappear. Show, don't tell. So if you start describing something to me in a design session, I will hand you the pen and say, right, just draw it. You can describe it to me, but get it recorded, get it visual for others to see. There's a lot around listening to others, about being respectful and letting other people speak and have their opinions and demonstrate those. It can get a little bit crazy and it's great fun. I run design sessions as part of some training I do on instructional design, and everybody always loves them. It's really great to kind of get that quick and easy creative outcome that then allows you to go on build afterwards. So you're not restrained by, but I can't get it to do this, and how do you do this in PowerPoint, or how do you do, you're just drawing and everyone can pick up a pen and do something. So it is great fun from that perspective, and it really does kind of stimulate you and get you going. Build on the idea of others. This is brilliant. We have this all the time. We'll draw something and we'll mean one thing and someone will completely misunderstand, normally because my drawing is so terrible, and they'll see something else. And sometimes what they see is better than what I meant. So we love this idea of, people will say, well, so you mean this? Oh, no, that's a good idea though. So, let that happen. Just being a kid and having a go and not feeling like you need to have the right answer, particularly if things aren't going very well and you're struggling, then, just have a go and put ideas down, and crazy ideas. It's always, Jen is brilliant for just coming up with crazy ideas that make us all go, oh, okay, well, I'm not sure, but what if we did this? She does good ideas as well, by the way. So yeah, make sure everybody's contributing. If you get stuck, just move on. That's another one, so I really want you to be doing this for every single slide in your module. But if you can't do one or two, then just park them, because no one can be creative when the pressure's on, oh, we must have the answer to this. So quite often we'll just move on. And sometimes that will be that then it comes to us driving home or in the shower. And sometimes it doesn't come at all, and then we build the module and then we can slot in because we've started to see how the visuals are going. So that's okay too. Just kind of be open to the process and go with it. So the next thing that's really important is that we always photograph our designs, and we also record them all. So we have these sheets that we use, and I think Jenny's going to post a link to our website where you can download a copy of the sheets that we use, and you can use them yourself. I know Laura's team sometimes use them. Oh, there's a nod of the head. So what we do is we've got a way to record who it's for. Obviously, from our perspective, we've got different clients, so it's about recording who the client is. It's very CP focused. I've realised that my examples are from Catch Protection as well. So we record in there, some logistics details. We record the drawing. Often we'll get the person who's better at drawing to do these sketches up, but only because somebody's got to remember what they meant at the end. And quite often my drawings, you can't remember. But that's okay, because I still contributed because I was in our design element of it. Record what the slides details are and any notes that you've, in terms of, now we use the term vibe all the time. So what's the kind of essence of what you're trying to get across? Is it moody, emotional? So we'll be recording things like that as well. you know, any animations, anything we discussed around, we'll include those as part of our notes. And that's really important because when you go to then build it, you will have the essence of the design session, you'll have the photographs, but the detail can be lost and forgotten. So the design sheets then become the pack that you use when you get into your tool, your authoring tool, to then do your design from there. So that's kind of where we go with, and that's why we have that detailed recording. I'm going to quickly go through the last bit so that I've got a little bit of time for questions if possible. So the top picture there, that's when we've done a design session where we've got a branching module. So we did a module with a US client who came over to spend a few days with us. And this module, the learner was making different decisions and there were different things happened as a result. So that's a photograph of that. So at that point, we talked about what the visuals would be, but we knew that the most important thing was to kind of get that flow. And then the other picture there, that's a different module, but that's quite a useful thing if you have got branching in your module to then record that, because that won't be so obvious from your design sheets. You can record that it's going to this bit after, but a visual record of that flow can be quite useful. Now, a lot of you I know will be designing on your own, so I wanted to evidence that we do sometimes on paper. I love to design e-learning on trains. I find that just kind of works very well for me. I'm kind of focused and distracted, and so sometimes we will do it on paper and we will be taking this up, but every time we'll be coming back to the team to present it, and every time, without fail, they will be making changes to it, saying, okay, but you said that, well, what if we did this instead? So it's still collaborative, but you know, here's the evidence that we're always doing it, even if it's working on our own. So just to kind of sum up, you know, this is where we're talking just at this bit. This is the bit between, you know, your getting your source material from your expert, the wedge between that and just getting on with building it. So I hope there's a tiny bit of time for, I'm terrible at running over. If you have got any questions, feel free to, Annabelle, I think, put the mic on and or give me chat questions and I will try and answer them because I can see them. Okay, so I did answer one of the.
Hi, Gill. Yeah, I think you did answer the question that
Good.
I saw in there. We've got one from Susie asking, how long does it take?
Interesting. How long does a design session take? It depends. I would say that for a half an hour module, we're probably looking at about half a day. So it's quite labour intensive, you know, particularly if I've got, you know, four people from the team in there. If I'm doing it on my own, it's probably quicker because I don't have to communicate so much of what I'm thinking to others. But I would say that I don't always prefer the outcome. You know, I think that collaborative process is so important that it's worth it. So yes, you're probably looking at about half a day. Yeah.
Okay. And I can see Susie's also posted a couple of useful resources that you've created for our website as well. And those are all free resources too. Thank you so much.
Oh, can I just answer this last question?
Yeah,
do you storyboard after or just go from the design? We just go from the design boards. So I think Susie's got the process that we use actually in one of her articles there. But yes, for us, we take that and then we produce an outline and a prototype so that we haven't built the whole thing yet, but we've communicated the outcomes of the design session into that. So very quick last plug. If you are interested, I am planning to write up my summaries of as many instructional design models as I can, which we can then use internally, but why not share them? So I'm going to put them on the blog. So you can find them on the blog, but you can also sign up to our blog from our website, sign up for the newsletter, and then you'll also get them pushed. So if you are interested in hearing our kind of summaries of some different instructional design models, then sign up or check back at the blog on a regular basis.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jill.
You.